No, don't work with these guys at all. So I'm just the sound voice about.
Okay, thank you. The great productivity debate now for the next hour, and I'll hand over to Lisa Commane, Chief Operating Officer for the Government Property Agency. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Just check the mic works. Hello, everybody. I hear you've been having a great day here today, and really nice to see people here in person, and I think we've got a lot of colleagues also who are joining us online. We've got a fabulous panel session lined up today for you. And we titled this session The Great Productivity Debate, which is, if anything, I think is particularly topical. It feels very relevant to be focusing on productivity, as so much of what you've been talking about over the last 2 days has been about that fact, the way that we can use more human-centred leadership, and the way that we can use technology and digital and smarter working to deliver increased productivity in all of our work. Before we get into the conversation, I just wanted to do a few introductions, and I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves too. So my name's Lisa Commane. I'm Chief Operating Officer at the Government Agency, and I'm really, really delighted to panel host this afternoon. We're going to hear a little bit from our guest speakers after they've introduced themselves, and hopefully that will get us a bit warmed up for a bit of a panel discussion, and then what I know no doubt will be some questions from the audience, both here in Birmingham and online too. So please do get your questions and comments ready. I think probably by now you'll be familiar with the Q&A function, so please do get thinking about that and get your fingers ready to add those questions to the panel later. For those of you who are joining remotely, please feel free to use the chat box, and let's keep building on this smarter working community that I know certainly I was part of in COVID actually, and I know is continuing to thrive today. It's really, really brilliant to see. So without further ado, I'm just going to perhaps go along the panel here and just ask each of you in turn just to say hello to the audience, what your name is, and the organisation that you are from. So starting with you then, Jack.
Thank you, Lisa. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jack Watson. I'm the Managing Director of Bytes Software Services. We're a digital transformation and cybersecurity partner. So we have the luxury and the honour of dealing with a really broad array of customers in the UK, public sector entities, corporate entities, across all verticals. So we have a wonderful exposure to common and shared challenges that people have, but also what people are doing to get value in this sort of modern era of hybrid work.
Thanks, Jack. Great to have you here. And Dom?
Hi again, everyone. I'm Dominic Brankin. I'm the Property Services Director at the Government Property Agency.
Anthony?
Hi everyone, I'm Anthony Osho. I work for GP, Great Portland Estates, in the private sector. I'm the Customer Relationships and Insights Lead. Great Portland Estates are a property developer with a London portfolio. We have about 3 million square feet of space. 80% of that is office space and 20% of that is retail.
Thank you. Ian?
Good afternoon now, everybody. Good to see you again for those that are here this morning. For those here who weren't, my name's Ian James. I'm the Managing Director and Team Principal of McLaren Electric Racing, which incorporates our NEOM, McLaren, Formula E and Extreme E teams, and a very proud partner with the MOD on the Extreme E side of things. So good to see you all again.
And David?
Hello, my name's David D'Souza. I'm the Chief Executive of Ferrari. No, sorry, it's worth a try, wasn't it? No, it's not that. I'm Director of Profession for the CIPD. We're the professional body for HR and people development. So the chances are, if you work with an HR professional, they're one of our members.
Brilliant. Wow, what a panel. And we've been in, I don't know whether, is it the green room or the speaker room? So we've just been in there and sort of meeting each other, actually. Obviously, Dom and I work together, but other colleagues don't know each other. And it's really fascinating, I think, when you come to these sort of events and you connect with people and you meet new people, all of you are doing really interesting jobs. So great to be with colleagues today. So the question of productivity then. Can't really open a newspaper without discussions around productivity. And as human beings, are we being productive enough? What can make us more productive? How can we support our well-being? So there's loads that we can get into today. Perhaps a good starting point may be to take us right back to basics. And let's define what we mean by productivity. And that may be different for each colleague on the panel, possibly. And it may be different to colleagues in the audience, but I'd really like to start to hear some perspectives on what we actually mean by that. David, let's start with you. A people perspective or something a bit different maybe? What does it mean to you?
Well, I'm kind of tempted to ask the audience whether you feel productive right now. Like, could you put your hand up if you feel productive right now? Well, which is odd, because you're just sitting in a darkened room doing nothing except listening to us. So there's a kind of stored future productivity there, which is you believe this to be a worthwhile place to be for the progress towards your future aims. So there's different ways of thinking around productivity, I think. The first one is purely economic. So if you're looking at it at an economy level, you're looking at purely output per unit of labour. And that's a really easy way for economists to look at it, but actually you miss some nuance in there. So professions like teaching don't necessarily count in some of those calculations. So you can be building for the future, but you're not necessarily productive now. And that's why I think economists have got quite a narrow view of it. You've got organisational productivity, and what sits within organisational productivity is normally your effectiveness of moving towards the goals that you want to achieve. It's a nice shorthand for that. Has the organisation been productive today? Well, is it closer to that? And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about measurement as well as we go through. Easier to measure in some industries than another. Whether you've got a fast car or not, doing exactly what you expect it to do is perhaps easier to measure than the quality of output of a journalist. But then you've got individual productivity, and there's been a massive focus on that over the last few years. You'd only have to look on TikTok to think that productivity is a new and smarter way to fill a dishwasher. But it's slightly more nuanced from that, and I think that's about whether people feel that they've made worthwhile progress against the goals that they've been set by the organisation. I think there's quite often a discrepancy between the organisational concept of productivity and the individual one. I think it's possible in an organisation that isn't well aligned for everyone to feel like they're being productive and the organisation not quite to be nailing that. And that's why I think it's really important to drill down in those different concepts and measures, because they have different implications depending on which ones you target. And I think asking people, are you productive, may not be the same as answering, is your organisation productive? And that's where you get into measures and the importance of the language.
Thanks, David. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because people make organisations. You know, we are the human beings that form organisations, and so perhaps measuring this on different bases is in itself a quite a challenging thing. What does a productive day look like for you then? Give us an insight into the world of David. What does productive look like?
Oh, it's a horrible, horrible thing, the world of David. I think I think it actually is fundamentally different for leaders and organisations because you've got high levels of agency. So I think you're looking to do probably four things. One is increase the level of alignment that people have with what you're trying to do. Secondly, express clearly the standards of what excellence looks like for the organisation. Thirdly, motivate and energise people towards that. And fourthly, part of my job is making decisions. So if at the end of a day, I can look back and go, I've shifted the dial on one of those things. So either I've made decisions that have been lurking about for a long time in the system, or people are more energized, they have a better sense of direction on what we're trying to achieve. That's a really good day for me. But I started off my career in retail, and that was literally how many shelves could people fill per hour. So good day for me will look radically different for someone, for instance, working in our contact center, where it's more tangible in terms of the measures and the outputs for customers. I look after a policy team at the moment, policy and public affairs. They're doing some brilliant work engaging with the new government around the impact of some of the legislation that might be brought in. It's really difficult to measure what a good day for the policy team looks like. You can know it and you can feel it, but it's harder for me to say, what have you specifically done today that's driven that different organisational outcome? So my good days are the ones I sit back and, like I say, I can say I've really shifted the dial on one of those four things.
Thank you. So following this theme of I'm hearing of kind of everyone might be different and different situations are different. Perhaps Ian, we can go to you. I mean, McLaren a very different organisation to what I work in and what David works in. And you lead presumably teams in very high pressure organisation doing quite innovative things. How are you driving productivity in that kind of environment? And what do you feel that means and think that means for your teams and yourself?
Well, I think it's interesting listening to David and again, how many synergies and similarities there are between industries and organisations that on paper might actually look very different. And productivity, for me as an individual, is very different from productivity for the team in which I represent. And I think the key thing is are we productive as a team? To your point, actually, I mean, our measurement of that is very easy. It's, are we winning our races? Ultimately, that's what we exist to do. But a productive day for me is different to that of the team. And I think we spoke this morning actually about empowerment and empowering a team to take decisions, empowering a team to actually move things in the right direction is crucially important. And one of the best mechanisms of doing that is enabling the decisions to be made at the highest point of knowledge. And I think this is absolutely crucial. So this is one of the things that drives productivity within our team. It's an enabler in order to do that. And my role then becomes very easy. So actually, if I am not productive in terms of my own output, it generally means that the team is working as it should be, especially when we actually get trackside. One example of that, I remember a time when, and we have brilliant engineers working for us, but you've got to remember that there's a driver out on track and they're having to manage the other cars that are around them. They're having to manage driving on these incredibly tight tracks at phenomenal speeds, the strategy and so on and so forth. And then you've got these engineers in the background that are trying to work out all the different scenarios and permutations when actually the driver just needs a decision. And engineers by their very nature, and I say that as one, will love to get lost in the detail. And at one point, if I have to come on the radio and say, decision, that's all I need to do sometimes to enable us actually to get the end result and to that end be productive as well. So it's relatively straightforward in that sense.
Wow, I'd love to be trackside. That sounds fabulous. And I guess your role then, as you described it, is kind of sometimes observing, hearing, coaching the team, thinking and observing that flow of the team as well is what I'm kind of hearing in that. That must be quite an interesting role to play.
Yeah, I touched on it this morning, so apologies if I'm repeating myself again, but I'm a jack of all trades and master of none, and pretty much the only generalist within the team, and it's a team of absolute specialists. So in that way, as I say, if the team is working perfectly, there's actually very little I need to do at that stage, and that's when the system is as productive, is as efficient as it possibly can be. But it's helpful there to have that backstop, if you like, to have somebody that's a little bit removed from the detail that can maybe observe something that others haven't picked up on, and it's as simple as that. At least that's how I justify my role anyway.
And I'm sure the team would appreciate that actually. Sometimes as a leader, your job is almost redundant when you're doing your job, if you see what I mean, but they know you're there actually.
If I meddle too much, that's when the problems start, I promise you that.
Thank you, great. Well, we'll come back to some of these themes later. I'm going to keep moving through the panel, though, and getting some of these perspectives. So, Dom, I'm going to come to you next. We've already heard quite a bit, actually, about the people and the leadership aspects of productivity and how that leads to effectiveness and teams working really, really well. And we know that the public sector and the civil service will always need spaces to be they're most productive in. So particularly with your experience in the Government Property Agency, the work that we're doing to transform the estate, what are your reflections on how the workplace can really enable and empower people to be at their best?
Well, and I think that is the key point, Lisa, that property and buildings can be economic, they can be efficient and they can be effective, but only in the service of the people who are using them to deliver a set of outcomes for somebody. And really understanding what it is those individuals need to do to deliver that set of outcomes. And in our context, we're talking about helping civil servants do their best jobs for the citizens that we all serve. And that's a really important thing to do. What we do matters. So it's not a very long value chain between providing great places to work and helping the civil service be the best that it can be. And I think just to connect the sort of building and the leadership point, because I think, particularly as you develop as a leader, especially when you're leading people whose jobs you can't do, which I definitely put myself in that category, very often the best thing that I can do is get out of the way and hopefully allow them to achieve. I think it's quite similar when it comes to the building. Actually, it needs not to get in the way. It has to be an enabler, and the workplace has to create an experience that just allows people to do all of those things that they need to do. And we've been talking for a while about 5 C's as drivers for people coming together in a workplace, around concentration, creativity, community, caring and collaboration, as being sort of big abstract things that people typically come together to do. And that means that the design of the physical space and the services that support people in that space have to be focused on enabling all of those different things. So, I think it's really encouraging that we've moved on from kind of a debate around the workplace just being somewhere that everybody goes to be really creative and to collaborate. And sometimes that is what people need from their workplace. But very often they need it to be a place where they can concentrate and focus, and where they can support themselves to be productive. Just picking up one of David's points, that measuring productivity for knowledge work is just notoriously difficult. We've spent quite a bit of time talking to organisations across different sectors, just in case somebody's cracked it, but we haven't found one yet. So we have to be a bit more creative and think about, okay, well, how do you maybe measure the shadow of productivity? What are the other characteristics that are consistent with, as David said, actually you kind of know when you've had a good day. So what are the characteristics? What are the things that you see doing that? But all of that comes down to really understanding what it is that people need from their workplace. Engaging with them directly on what they need to be able to be productive, and being, confronting some of the brutal truth about, how well or poorly we are meeting those needs. And where we're not, we've got to figure out different ways of delivering so that we can deliver those great places to work that genuinely allow civil servants to do their best job.
And I think that observation that you made around when it works, almost people don't notice. It's kind of like those observations about trackside, and until you've actually thought about it and kind of exposed what are the things that are working, you kind of don't think about it. In some of the insight work that we're doing in the GPA, what are some of the things that are coming out that are really important to people? Can you talk just briefly a little bit more about that, Dom, where we have exposed the insight on what works for people in the context of productivity?
So some of it is, it's not new. It's tidiness, toilets and tea points. And there are various, variations of that kind of articulation. And to a degree, we're only as good as our last block toilet. Trying to lift it to a more strategic level, although those, literal hygiene factors, that's got to be, those essentials have got to be the things that you nail, because that's what earns you the right to do something a little bit different. We're chuffed to bits that we've got 2 out of 6 public sector buildings that have been accredited as Leesman Plus, providing really great workplace experiences. And that's across sector, it's across countries, it's out of 9,000 plus buildings that have been assessed. But that's been driven by trying to understand what it is that people need. Some of the learning that we've got through our engagement with Leesman and building up a huge data set now, to give us a really confident understanding of what it is people are looking for. The things that are emerging now, and particularly since coming out of those lockdowns and that enforced different way of working, is about a sense of control, particularly over noise levels, being able to control that. The acoustic environment is really important. But we've also seen that there are still activities that people do that are better supported in different places, whether that's in an office or at home or somewhere else. And a lot of that does come down to the ability to control noise. Temperature is always an issue, but my mum would just tell me to put another jumper on. So there are, don't have to be building solutions to deal with those sorts of things. So a lot of it is about those essentials, making sure that they are right, but then it's about creating the right environments for people to be doing different kinds of work. And I think maybe I'll just finish off on some of the things that can get in the way of building supporting people is it doesn't work if you change the design of the workspace but don't invest in helping people understand how to get the best out of those workspaces. If people are working in a very traditional way but in an activity-based working environment, then actually their experience is going to drop. And if their experience drops, their engagement will drop and their productivity will probably follow. So investing in the people change aspects of a lot of what we're doing is absolutely crucial.
Thanks, Dom. I'm going to come to Anthony again in a moment, but perhaps just before I do that, just to start to get people in the audience here in the room and online, just perhaps have a little bit of a reflection about your experience of your own personal productivity and what really matters to you. Because I think that reflection is often quite helpful. I mean, it certainly helps us in designing workspaces, but it also, I mean, certainly it helps me every day to think about when I'm the most productive and what might the things be in my environment, whether that be at home, in the office, whether that be about, it could be about the exercise routine I have in the day or things that I'm doing to kind of relax and all of those kind of wider things that really help us to thrive at work. And perhaps people just having a little bit of a think about that and a bit of self-reflection as part of this discussion that we're having today and what you might take away and remind yourself is useful in terms of your own ability to thrive and achieve the goals that you've got. Anthony, I'm going to come to you next. Fascinating role that you've got in the private sector, and again, really at the heart of thinking about customer experience and how you're entering new markets. Talk to us a little bit about your role and your understanding of what customers are looking for in terms of a productive working environment.
Yeah, I think it's much of what Dom had mentioned. Like, we offer 3 core products as a developer. So we have Cat A space, traditional, you come and fit it out, put your own design team. We then have a fitted product where we put all the furniture in for you and you manage the services. And then our final piece is a fully managed product. That's where we do everything from the coffees, tea, the cleaning, business rates, the whole shebang. And I think what that's really taught us is across all those different needs from different customers that we see, the basics are the most important. It's, are the toilets clean? Do you have a welcome face on reception? And if you can get those right, then you can start to layer on the additional amenities and services. And what we're seeing is there's definitely a demand for those services, and that's why we're really growing our fully managed product, because there's a lot of need for everything from drag parties or beers at 5 o'clock in the evening. And this is, as we see a younger demographic come into the workforce and their needs slightly change. From a design perspective, it's all about, because we're building these places and building these spaces for businesses to almost plug in and play, they need our guidance a little bit more. So one thing we're always focusing on is just having the different types of areas. So whether that's space to collaborate, whether that's touch-down desks, or whether we're putting in more quiet pods, always in demand. Meeting and boardrooms also heavily in demand, and I think that's one thing I've seen over the last 6 months is a lot of our new customers are downsizing larger HQ buildings for smaller office space in central London where teams are working in a hybrid way. So their needs for larger space for an all hands or a Teams meeting or a conference like this are lower than they were before, but they still need them. So as a developer, it's constantly thinking as to how do we create a space that's adaptive enough for anyone or any business to come in and work from?
And I'm going to go slightly off script now, but we were talking again in the green room, weren't we, about how fast the turnover is now. So we're not looking necessarily at 25-year deals. You might be looking at 1 or 2, much more flexible space. So how do you kind of handle that? Because when you're building things and you're making changes, they're a bit more permanent than just something you can switch on and off. So what are you seeing in terms of themes and how that's supporting people's productivity and their ways of working?
It's really interesting, and I think you will make mistakes, and we've definitely made mistakes in the past. Shoving 2 Peloton bikes in a corner room does not count as wellness, as we found out.
No.
And I think for us, it's being able to measure is really, really important. It's just being able to see, right, what services are people actually using, and co-create when we design. So I would say we're on iteration 3 of our Flex design, which we launched in 2020. We realized that, the booth that no one uses, actually that needs to be a pod going forward. The meeting rooms need to be a bit larger. The meeting room tech providers need to change. But with that high turnover as well, we really need to build a strong relationship with our customers because the market's super competitive. So for us, we're constantly looking for ways to evolve the product, which is nice because the customer is constantly getting new things, additions, tweaks and changes to their offering.
And people like technology doesn't stand still, right? So these things are evolving all the time. How are you getting that feedback? Is that instant feedback? Do you have systems and processes for doing that? And I'm just interested in how as a business you're kind of gathering that, looking at the insight and how that's then influencing what you're doing next.
It's a mix. We're developing, I think real estate traditionally has not been a great industry to collect data. So we started initially surveying our customers annually, but now with some of the uses in the space, so it might be a meeting room screen or some technology that we've got in the building, we will send app notifications through our app in the buildings to get feedback on certain new products or services that we're trying. We rely heavily on the team on the ground, and I don't think that should ever be underestimated. The service partners and the customer experience managers who manage the buildings are probably your richest source of information at all times. So we take that information, and we're also now strategically meeting, and our exec go and meet our customers as well to hear exactly what they need, and then we'll work strategically to further develop the product.
Really helpful. I guess finally, before I move on, a lot of the colleagues in the audience will probably be from the public sector and working alongside colleagues in the private sector, and that blend of sectors is really important. Have you got any observations on the sort of similarities and differences that you might see in the work?
Controversially, I don't think there should be a big difference. Ultimately, it's all about output, isn't it? Like, we're all just trying to I hate this phrase, get stuff done, because I don't know, it seems to have taken over the vernacular at the moment, but everyone's trying to get stuff done. I can't really see a massive difference in how we try and drive people and get the best out of the resources. I think there's a mix of the environment is great and offering flexibility. I think a hybrid is here to stay. But a big part of productivity for me, or at least when I speak to our customers and business leaders, is it's about leadership. It's not just about setting a policy that's 5 days in the office. That might not be driving the best output. I think we're all facing the same challenges.
Thank you. I mean, there's a lot of debate about productivity, and is there a difference between the public and the private sector, and where's the investment going, and how do we work together? But certainly I know as part of the conversations that you've been having here today, one of the themes that's come out has been about how we can work across silos, how we can continue to learn actually in this what is a very diverse ecosystem where people have squiggly careers, they move from the public to the private sector. We're working very closely as sectors on many things. So there's definitely a lot of learning for us to continue to do and see ourselves as partners in that. So thank you, that's great. Jack, come to you next. We haven't talked that much yet about technology, digital, data, AI. And clearly there's a massive role for all of those to play in productivity and the way that we work and the way that we live and how we can really improve service delivery in times of resource constraint as well. So I'm really interested in sort of shifting this conversation a little bit to talk a bit more about that innovation and your experience of that. What would you have to say about the role that technology, perhaps as a start, has to play in helping us to do something a little bit different?
Thanks, Lisa. Well, the first thing to say is we're a technology reseller, so technology is really important But in all seriousness, it's a tool. Technology is a tool. Technology gives you the opportunity to innovate and to do things differently. I think it's also an opportunity to strengthen the very best expectations that you want to deliver across an organisation and ensure that people have the right tools to do their job and to do their job exceptionally well. And what that represents for us as an organisation is a real opportunity to help organisations create a purpose. And I think when people are showing up to the office with a very clear purpose, clarity as to their role within driving that outcome, I think that goes a long way in terms of the talking about the hybrid working debate and what productivity is and isn't. I mean, productivity for me isn't about being busy. Productivity isn't necessarily measured in time; it's measured in your distance travelled, and that's certainly how I measure, the productivity that I have within a day. Not in the context of getting on the train from Newcastle down to Birmingham, but the distance travelled against the key initiatives and the core things that we're looking to achieve as an organisation, both as Bytes Software Services and on behalf of our customers as well. So technology underpins all of this and represents opportunity to provide more collaborative spaces, to provide and support more flexible working. Talked about it a little bit in the keynote, creating an environment whereby you can allow individuals to be flexible in their work, to flow to where the work is needed, to focus and to have the autonomy to make the decision as to what's best. And so much of that comes back to building a platform of trust. And that platform of trust is built on technology. Other examples that we have kind of dovetail with some of the things that Anthony said in his piece is Bytes, we remodeled some of our offices, specifically our head office after COVID, to adjust to this new mode of working and hybrid working. We're actually undergoing a second iteration of that. So rather than going big bang, we're looking and learning and adapting these spaces and infusing these spaces with technology to help us make better decisions, support people better, and ultimately unlock that potential that exists within every individual within our organisation. And the first thing you realise when you walk into Bytes HQ, up there in lights and neon lights, is we grow great people to deliver amazing things. That's what we do. And the technology that we provide and that we're advocates of help us, support us in that vision for the people that work at Bytes. A good example, I think, of that is, and this is more of a sort of a future present, the capability that exists within a technology that vast majority of organisations will already have access to today. And for us, that would manifest itself as, let's say you've got Microsoft Teams, you're a Microsoft 365 customer, you've got Microsoft Teams, and you're using that as your collaboration platform. Now, what we have are sensors in our desks and our booths and our meeting rooms around the organisation that show you the availability so that you can make good decisions in terms of booking that space and the availability of that space. The second piece is, imagine an environment whereby I'm working from home. I live in Newcastle, so I was a hybrid worker in a leadership role within Bytes well before COVID, working 3 days a week. And it represents an opportunity to create an environment whereby I can go onto Teams, I can use a technology like Viva Insights or something like from that realm to actually inform me, to say, hey, Jack, your colleague X, Y, and Z that sits in your team, or the person that you've been interacting recently based on the telemetry that Copilot sees as to the documentation that I've been working on recently, the presentations and the events that I've been partaking in, and says, oh, did you know Anthony, David and Dom are all in the office tomorrow and they've all booked a seat and they're here, would you like one? And I'll click yes, accept, and it books that seat for me in the hot desking environment, and I can sit.
I love that. I didn't know that. I didn't know we could do that. It's wonderful.
So those types of opportunities are what this technology really helps us provide, and there'll be a significant portion, I'm sure, of people that will have a collaboration platform. It doesn't have to be Teams, but I use the example of Teams in terms of that's what we use. You'll have Teams and you'll have Viva Insights as licensing within your existing contractual agreements with that particular vendor, for example. So you've got the opportunity to light those up. And we have that physical sensors and sort of a green-red light in terms of desk availability within our office space. So this is one example, but it actually brings people together, and it hugely increases footfall back into the office, because it increases fear of missing out. Because you can see your colleagues and your manager and your friends that you work with, and where they're sitting. You can also see where I'm sitting, and you can avoid me as well. So it's useful from that perspective. So these types of, just one example of something that can be pretty transformational in terms of drawing people back as a magnet into your office space, and using the technology to really increase that level of collaboration. And we see some of the best ideas that we've had as an organisation, and some of the worst, have come around from those accidental collaborations and conversations that people have around the office when they bump into each other. And I think it's really important in the context of productivity for us to point out that some people believe that they're more productive at home. And depending on what you're going to do. And I think it's really important for us to recognise that you don't want to focus on the individual, maximise the individual productivity of a single person at the expense of long-term innovation. And you've got to use technology in order to create those platforms and those experiences that create that innovative, purposeful sense of belonging and meaningfulness to your work within your office environment or within your home working environment. And the technologies that we advocate for our customers, and these shared challenges that we see across different organizations, really allow us the privilege of being able to kind of show, here's what works, here's some other people that have that same challenge as you, and we're in a position to actually share what works, what doesn't work, why it worked for them, and where they're getting value and success. And it represents a great opportunity to kind of contribute to forums like this.
Thank you. And, it reminds me of this smarter working community, actually, and the work that many of you will have done in COVID, which was to create those opportunities for getting together when we couldn't do it in person, actually. And we learnt so much in that period. Many of us may not have been using the equivalent of Teams before. We're now totally using it. I mean, no one can remember a world where we didn't have it. But those opportunities where, as you described, to now use technology to find the intentional touch points when we can come together in the office, because that's what people really value. They value coming in to collaborate, to concentrate, to kind of form those relationships. And I think that's quite insightful, how you're blending that human need with what technology can do to help achieve that solving that problem, really.
Absolutely. I mean, it gives you an opportunity to use technology for self-learning and skills development, which is massively important to every organisation in unlocking the potential of every single person within your organisation. So that alone represents a huge goldmine of opportunity for improvement. We've seen some significant success as an organisation in leveraging that and helping our customers realise that potential that they innately have within their own organisation. So it's a hugely exciting thing for us to participate in and be consistently learning in that regard as to what works and what new technologies come down the line that can help support that. I mean, the other piece for me, which is really important, is with the advent of artificial intelligence and what we talked about in the keynotes, is you've got a coach in your pocket right now. And regardless of whether your organisation has rolled out a business-orientated artificial intelligence technology, the reality is people will have access to that as consumers, and they will be using that in their work environment, whether you like it or not. So we're all in the game, whether you like it or not. And people are using it in their work, whether you're aware of it or not. But that does represent opportunity to be a coach. Coach me like I've used this prompt myself, which is, imagine you're Steve Jobs. I've got this scenario. It's a challenging, crucial conversation with a member of staff, and the output that I'm looking for us is for them to feel empowered and to have clarity of expectation as to what we need to be doing better and what additional support they need from me. Put that in as my objective, and the coach in my pocket will help support me in having a more effective conversation with that individual.
Fabulous. I'd normally ask Dom, but maybe not from next week. Okay, look, crikey, time is flying, everybody. Perhaps just going to ask one more question to the panel and just get some final observations, and perhaps someone can just unlock the technology here for me so that I can start to see the question and answers when we get to that in a few minutes. Wow, there's so many themes that have come out there. I guess to all of the panel now, we've talked quite a bit about the blend of the human, the technology, the how we measure productivity, what it means to us. Are there any final reflections from people just on some of those themes and perhaps from what you've heard from the panel members as well that's just sparked something that you wanted to share with the audience before we start to close? David?
It looks like I'm going first, doesn't it? Sorry, I was being very polite there. I think there's something around that clarity of what you're trying to achieve. And actually the level of focus on that, then the question is how do you get there in the most effective way? And that is undoubtedly a blend of technology, the environment that you're working in, and also the connections that you have within it. But I think one thing that's been tapped on quite regularly has been that notion of empowering people to help them do that once they're aligned. But secondly, that development piece, which I think is really important. So how do you think long term about what your organisation needs and design for that capability building now, which is a real challenge, I think. And the second thing is obviously that tension, I think, and the ongoing debate about the impact of different requirements for people to either be physically present or not, or a blend of it, and the impact that has on productivity. And I think we've done a lot of research in that space, and I would say it is almost entirely still clearly dependent on the organisational context and the challenges that it faces. I think we will find that some organisations absolutely probably need their people in more than they may have considered to be the case a couple of years ago. And some organisations may find that actually they've reached the perfect blend of working now. That will be for the organisation. It also varies by individual within them. And I think it's such a wonderful opportunity for organisations to think about how they can better engineer work to be successful for people and for themselves and the objectives. But it's also a far more complex challenge than when you just expected things to be the way they had been, because that's just the way it was.
Yeah, it's a real leadership challenge, right? You know, we're all continuing to grapple with it, I think. Any other reflections upon Anthony?
That's on. I just feel like measurement is the holy grail, and that's going to be the real challenge for everyone going forward. We're now working in this new hybrid way, and you know, I'm in real estate, quite a traditional sector. We're selling space. The view from our company and our competitors we need to be in. So I think it's really difficult to measure, especially with some of the intangibles. But I think every organisation needs to work out what its metric is. And you know, that might be engagement, that might be something around culture and how you feel about the company you're working for, or it might be commercial in terms of your output and your profits, or winning races, for example. But I think really honing in on what are we trying to what we're trying to achieve here, and how can we tangibly measure it? It's kind of still feels like the missing piece for most.
And some may be a bit more qualitative, I guess, is the other thing, and that's more difficult to get an investment case for and to value.
It's harder.
You know?
It's harder if you're spending millions of pounds on an office space. You need to demonstrate that it's doing something for you.
Any final reflections before I go to what is a very long list of questions here, I have to say?
Just one thought from my side, because I found it fascinating, obviously talking about the working patterns that we've all had experience of in the past few years, the effect of property, and we've had that in our organisation very recently as well as we've moved locations, and then obviously technology plays a key role, and these are all enablers. One thing just on reflection that I think motorsport in the past has been very poor at, but we're trying to change, and that's the human element within the topic of productivity. And for me, that's linked in with innovation. And what we have done as motorsport organisations in the past is we've targeted to get people in from a very small pool of institutions. You know, it's the Oxbridge candidates and so on and so forth, because the perception has been they've been the best. What we actually found, we've played something called personality poker, and I don't know if you've done this in your organisations, where we've got the team together. And through this game, which I won't go into detail now, but you actually end up with all of the engineers standing in one corner, and all the finance people in another corner, and all the management in another corner, just through the analysis of their character and the perception of others that they have of the individual's character as well. And actually the power of any organisation is then how those people in those different corners interact with each other. And that for me is one of the key elements of productivity as a team. And for that reason, I think there's a realisation, or has been a realisation in recent past, that actually we need to be much more diverse as a team in order to foster that innovation, but actually get the productivity out of the team as well. And this is something that we're really focused on now, making sure that we widen the net, that when we're actually having the opportunity to bring new candidates in, that we're not focusing on those classic institutions, but we're actually going outside of that. And we're already starting to reap the benefits of that as well. So that's something which I think is going to be a real powerful enabler alongside all the other things that we've spoken about during the course of the afternoon.
I love that, and you know, clearly in some of our work and my world, we're really trying to get civil servants working even more closely with the communities that they serve, and representing different people from different backgrounds who can bring new thinking into policy making, which affects all of our lives, right? So it's really powerful point. Well, I'm going to try and combine some of these questions and just maybe do a little bit of quick fire to the panel. There's an interesting one here around new roles, which perhaps links with that point on skills, actually. So, panel, anything that you would like to say in terms of new roles that you're seeing emerging in your sector as a result of this digital world, or as a result of different ways of working that we're having to grapple with as leaders?
It's the silence.
Yeah. Is that difficult?
I can chip in. I think for us, the way that's manifesting itself is not necessarily new roles in the sense of creating a new job role within the organisation. What we're seeing is organically people are shifting in the context of their priorities and their day-to-day work, what it is that they're doing. And as a result, that expectation they're carrying with them. So it's not necessarily a case of from the top down the organisation saying, these are my expectations of you within this role in this department. What we're doing is creating a trusted platform whereby people are going and flowing to where the work is. And that has a lot to say about the great productivity debate in the context of, it doesn't matter to me where you're doing that from. Within certain parameters, you can be achieving against those things. And I think that kind of hopefully answers some point of that question. And what we're seeing within the technology market and as a channel partner is that people are finding their roles are organically changing and they're onboarding new skills in order to deliver what the demand they're seeing coming into the team, whether that be through the customer, the supplier, or through adjacent teams within the organisation.
And I'm hearing that it's something about adaptability and resilience to change and all of those things, which is not the traditional technical skills. It's kind of those broader managerial and leadership skills. You
might want to say actually coaches in-house, but it just happens we're using technology to do that coaching for us.
Yeah, I feel the need to bring David in on that point, but anything you wanted to add before I go to the next question?
I think next year is going to see a really interesting overlap and integration between technology and people in a way that we haven't seen. One of the most interesting, I would say, debates rather than something I'm seeing in a concrete way is whether the HR and people teams need to extend their remits to think about managing AI. So if you've got something that needs training, you need its behavior managing, and you need to think about its deployment in the organisation. Where does that capability and the intelligence to think about that in a broad way? And actually, I think I think that's a multidisciplinary thing. I don't think any profession should be trying to own it. But we are seeing organisations, some I think in a healthy way, and some in a way that should rightly cause us concern, stretching the boundaries of where they're replacing human capability with technology. And we need to think really hard societally around what we want from that. But I'll come back to, it's that point around what you're trying to achieve. Because if there's a more graceful way of doing it using technology, we should probably be considering that. There's a lovely old Bill Gates line, which was, if I've got something remotely complex to do, I'll give it to the laziest person I know because they'll find the easiest way to do it. And I think there's something in that, which is if we can use technology to free up human capability, we should do that. But there are some spaces that we need to be very careful about where we're employing it.
Yeah, thank you. Some real moral issues for us to think about there too. Well, we've got a number of questions. Perhaps I'm going to ask Dom and then Anthony just on this set of themes. There's something about how we're designing workplaces and how we're designing those both with individual needs in mind to facilitate some of the quiet conversations people want to have versus the collaborative stuff. And there's something about specifically Dom, around the government design kind of principles and how we get the right balance between individual needs and wider civil service kind of overall requirements. So perhaps maybe Dom start first, and then Anthony, your perspective would be brilliant too.
So there is something really important about the adaptability of design. If you take a trip around the country to some of the government hubs that we've commissioned over the last few years, and if you do them in order in which we open them, they all change and they improve. Some of it is quite subtle, some of it is more dramatic. So you see much more private conversation space or smaller meeting facilities in our later hubs compared to our earlier hubs, and that's absolutely driven through feedback from our customers and understanding the nature of the business they do and what they need to be able to do it. And I think it is about both the flexibility but also the range of spaces that we're making available to people. And there's it's not a science. I mean, some of it's scientific, but there is an art to finding the right balance. And I think balance is a theme that is becoming more and more important in terms of how people are delivering the work that they're being asked to do, and making sure that you've got the right combination of different spaces. There's quite a strong degree of modularity in our design, so that as we learn, we can swap out that booth for a pod, and we're not causing problems in terms of the floor plate and all of those sorts of things. So it's just building that in to give you more flexibility to respond to how the world changes, because we know it's going to continue to change and we'll have to respond to that. Rand, when she was talking earlier today about our partnership with Atkins Realis, was talking about how important the inclusivity of our design is to us and to the civil service that we are a part of, and that's not just about it's important because it's important, but it's important as an attractor of talent. To know that you're coming into an organisation that cares about these things and cares about people. But that's not easy either in terms of how you design for different people's needs. Increasingly with our focus on designing for neurodiversity, and different light levels and noise levels and all of those sorts of things. Our hubs tend to be fairly big, so that gives us quite a lot of space to be able to play with and make sure that we're providing a lot of that variety, but we don't always have that option, so there's inevitably going to be some compromise there.
Thanks, Dom. Anthony?
Yeah, I think there's 2 points on this. So I completely agree with Dom on the point of adaptability. So for us, with our newer developments, it's around, right, where can we put the servicing, the HVAC systems that mean we can be modular and put a partition wall up and then knock that down when the next customer wants to come in, because not every customer is going to be the same for us. So I think the more we can adapt, the more we can make sure that the cabling is under the flooring. These are the kind of things that will help as your needs grow and change. I think the other thing is designing for all users of the building. Sometimes, the operational teams in a building are the afterthought, and, we've got the lovely atrium overlooking London Bridge, and then the site team in a basement on the floor, which is not, in the basement floor, which is not actually going to be conducive to this whole building working well, because the site team need to be thought about. So this is where we're doing a lot more user profiling now when we get into the design and mapping the journeys, not just of those using the space in the office, but also those operating the space. So the cleaners, the security teams, where will they work from? Because ultimately the whole building needs to work efficiently. So yeah, those are the 2 points I'd consider on that one.
Thank you. I think we are pretty much out of time, sadly. So I'm going to start to draw us to a close. A really, really big thank you to the panel. You never quite know when you come to these things exactly where the conversation's going to go, and we all are from very, very different backgrounds and industries and perspectives, and there was a lot of commonality, but also really, really good to hear some of the differences as well. Great to hear about the leadership dimension, I think, and the people dimension alongside the role of property, and then some of the innovations in the technology as well, and how much that will continue to not just drive our short-term thinking, but importantly drive that longer-term creativity and innovation as well for us. I hope people have enjoyed the session. Perhaps we could just, in the usual way, thank our panel members.